Hello folks, this is Dave Lawrence here once again, and just wanted to do a little rant or just a little opinion voice here about the Occupy Wall Street movement and why we need to support it, or definitely why I support it and why I feel those that are behind it support it. And again, this is I don't know if we could say anti-Wall Street or anti huge big business and the things that they do in our country. Again, they have huge lobbying that works in their favor, in the political system in Washington, D.C., to have congressmen and senators change bills and write bills and make laws that make them more profitable, while the rest of us, the 99%, we don't get any breaks. Okay, and again, we're not asking for handouts, we're just asking for some equity here. But I saw a little blurb the other day of Newt Gingrich, who's running for president. He's a former Speaker of the House back in the 90s. I believe it was back in the late 90s during the Clinton administration. But he was pretty much wanting to put some blame on Chris Dodd and Barney Frank for their bill, the Dodd-Frank bill, which became law, shortly after President Obama became president. This law came into being to protect consumers and to somewhat regulate banks, as far as what they could do with credit cards and interest, fees, and just simple things. These weren't huge regulations, and for the most part, the Republican Congress right now has defunded any regulatory agencies that would monitor the banks and put this Dodd-Frank bill into place. But Newt Gingrich, again, he was kind of placing blame on these politicians, Chris Dodd and Barney Frank, placing blame on them for what's happening right now in our financial system. And I know Newt Gingrich is a really smart guy, and he knows he is. So I think he's just not being real sincere when he's laying blame on regulation causing our current economic woes. It doesn't take a lot of searching to find out how this really all happened. And it all really kind of started back in the 90s. When Clinton was president. I mean, you go back even further to when Reagan was president and the deregulation that started up. But, most recently in the 90s, there was a big deregulation craze in the banking industry. That's when the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed. Again, this was legislation that became law back in the 30s, after the Great Depression. A law that came into effect to keep commercial banks from speculating, investing people's money, hard-working average Joe money, to keep from speculating that money into the stock market and Wall Street. Again, there's investment banks that have always done that speculating and that gambling, if you will, and that's part of what they do. But they deal with investors that come to them to do that. And then you have the commercial banks, the banks on the corner here where we all deposit our checks and write checks to pay our bills. Those banks, under Glass-Steagall, were not allowed to speculate in Wall Street scams or, just craziness that happened that we saw it come to fruition in 2007, 2008. Anyway, the Glass-Steagall Act was I'm going to say rescinded in 1999. Again, this is during the Clinton administration, but also during the time that Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House, or it might have been Tom DeLay, but again, we both know they're right-wingers, and I don't have a real high opinion of them. We also know that during the 90s that there was a mini meltdown of a hedge fund, where again the government had to get involved to keep it from getting deeper into the system. So the government, I'm not going to say regulators, but Robert Rubin, for example, I think he was either Treasury Secretary Yeah, he was Treasury Secretary, and Alan Greenspan was chairman of the Federal Reserve. And they decided they had to get some banks to buy up this hedge fund so that it wouldn't get deep into the system and cause a complete financial meltdown. So we had a little taste of this back in the 90s. And again, it was the government that got involved, the regulators that got involved, that avoided a catastrophe. And then again, 2007, 2008 rolls along, and the regulators, the government, because again, they're the ones that have to watch what the private sector is doing, otherwise the private sector just goes crazy. Why don't we understand that? Or, some of us don't understand that, but it's pretty easy to see if you want to open your eyes and look at it. The financial meltdown happened not because, banks and corporations were getting taxed too much. It's because nobody's watching them and letting them do whatever they want to do. And now people, Newt Gingrich and other right-wingers want to say, well, our economy's in trouble because we're trying to regulate too much, or businesses can't decide what to do because there's too much uncertainty about their tax situation. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about raising taxes on the rich, on the millionaires and the billionaires. But over the past 12 years, taxes have been lower. I mean, taxes have actually been lower since the Eisenhower administration. So, I don't know where the uncertainty is for the corporations and the people that say that they won't hire because of taxes. That's not what it is. That's just smoke and mirrors there. You got to see through that. I mean, the reason that corporations aren't hiring is because there's no demand for products. They're only going to go into a growth phase if there's demand for products, which means they need to hire workers. They need to produce something here and not offshore. Again, so many corporations have moved offshore. They've moved their money offshore so they don't have to pay as much taxes. So again, there's tax reform we can do here that would maybe lower the corporate tax rate. But I think giving handouts to billionaires and millionaires, companies like GE, ExxonMobil, they should be paying taxes. They shouldn't be writing things off because things happened that weren't favorable for them in the market condition that they created. So anyway, folks, I'm just again saying, why would we want to side with the millionaires and billionaires that have been unfettered, unregulated for the past, I'm going to say at least the past 12 years, if not further back. I mean, like I said, we could go back to the Reagan era, we can go back to the Clinton era and see a lot of these things starting to happen. But the huge meltdown didn't just happen under Obama, and it just didn't happen under George W. Bush either. There's plenty of blame to go around, but we the people have to demand of our representatives, the Congress and the Senate, to start keeping their eye on the ball and to guard the chicken coop, so to speak, and get these corporate oligarchs, get them in line. Okay, don't do their bidding. Don't let the lobbyists control this any longer. So thanks for hearing me out, folks. Dave Lawrence saying bye for now.